Hello, hearth spacers. Oh, I'm looking a little bit fuzzy there. Okay, forgive the fuzziness of the hair. So, I come to you reeling, reeling from the discovery in Mike's book, which I trust, that the Danes rank hot drinks as being the most hyggelig thing they can think of, and Facebook as being the least hyggelig thing they can think of, which sets us a challenge. We're gonna buck that trend, making the hearth space hyggelig. I think that you're doing a great job with all of the lovely photographs and shares and things going on. So I defy the Danes. We have a hyggelig hearth space. But the topic is not whether or not the hearth space is hyggelig and whether or not Facebook is hyggelig. It is, I wanted to talk about food. This is something that I've been thinking about. I mentioned it to a couple of you over the last week, that I've been worrying about the section thinking about food and hygge. Because if you look at, all of the foods that are, that we often associate with hygge, they tend to be very, very calorie heavy, very, very sugary. And I for one, I'm trying really hard to keep my sugar intake down. So I've been thinking about that and thinking, well, can hygge be healthy? So the first thing I wanted to do was sort of dive into this a little bit, because it's only very recently that we've had access to the amount of very high, sugar, high fat food, in the history of humanity. So I would say, in a traditional sense, sugary food just wouldn't have formed a huge part of, the concept of hygge. We've got to the point now where, shops, food companies, food distributors, they're really good at creating that golden triangle, as they call it, of sugar, fat and salt, that sort of combination that makes us want to keep coming back for more and more and more. As we are consuming a lot of sugar. But I'd also bear in mind that if you think about where hygge originates, it's in those cold countries, dark countries, winter time. So if you did have sort of sugary food or salty food as well, a lot of that would have been to do with the preserving process, because there wouldn't have been as much access to fresh food. There would have been a lot of scarcity. So, these things would be treats. They'd be, really, really, this is a special treat. It's also worth bearing in mind that in the very cold climates, you needed a higher calorie intake. You want to have your layer of fat on you to keep you warm, and you're going to need a higher calorie intake. So for us now, we've got our central heating in our homes. We're not out in the cold as often by any means as our ancestors would have been. And so we just don't need the same level of calorie intake as they would have needed, even though we're getting it higher. So that's my my doom and despair piece on sugar and hygge. But I'm going to stop on that now, and I'm not by any means saying that we can't have, oh my God, I love a piece of cake. Who doesn't love a piece of cake? Cake or a biscuit, those are fine. And hygge in many ways helps us with that, because it's about creating a sense of occasion and a coziness and ceremony around the food choices, so that we don't just, I'm not just going to grab a Mars bar. Oh, Mars bar, no. And, sort of wolf it down. If I'm going to have a Mars bar, I'm going to have it in a hyggelig way. So you can think about it in that way. You can think about, okay, this is about honouring the food choice and saying, I'm just really going to enjoy this right now. But there are an awful lot of foods that we can bring into our hygge that aren't going to, increase the calorie intake. Rosia says, yes to cake, always, woohoo! Yeah, true, so true. But I've been thinking about making rock cakes, with lots of fruit in, like dried fruit. I used to do that a lot. Really good for ceremony. So I was known, back in the day when I wasn't, looking after children and doing lots of other things. I used to go to a lot of circles, and I used to bring my rock cake with me, and I put like allspice in it, and nutmeg, cinnamon, as many different types of dried fruit as I could possibly imagine in one handful. And they're really good for grounding. So after ceremony, thinking about hyggelig food is actually really helpful for grounding. done a big spiritual heady type thing, and then we want to move back into our body. So bringing in the carbs, bringing in the dried fruit and things is really helpful. This is also the time of year, you know, a lot of people have already done their preserving, but there's still time now, so you can be thinking about preserving and pickling. You know, what are the things that you like to do? I've got beetroot, pickled beetroot in my fridge at the moment, so you can get some really nice pickles as well. My mum's just given me a jar of pickle that she made. It's so good. You know, it's got apple in it, as well as sort of like pickled onions and things like that. It's just really, really nice. But anything homemade really is going to be hyggelig, you know. So if you're going to have cake that you've made, or better, cake that somebody else has made for you. No, it's going to be very hyggelig. Pack the love into the food, whatever it is that you're going to have. And the other things I wanted to mention were stews are traditionally very hyggelig as well. So anything that's been cooked very slowly, you might imagine that as being about the weekend. So I'm at the weekend and I've got lots of time to infuse my food with flavour through the course of the day. I'm going to use my slow cooker, or maybe a roast. Is roast hyggelig? Opinions, useful to know. Do you think that roast dinner is hyggelig? Put it up in the chat. And breads, anything with yeast. Bearing in mind that yeast is an element in the northern tradition, so it's sacred, you know. So sourdough breads, you know, slow made breads. I don't do a lot with the mother. You know, I know some people who are like all about the yeast, and they tend to the mother. You know, I really wish that I was that good. Maybe one day. And I think that's very hyggelig. You know, you've made your own bread with your own mother yeast. You know, that's got to be very hyggelig indeed. I do remember a tradition when I was a little girl. We had it was a German friendship cake, and it was just circulate round and round our community, and it was made with this this mother yeast, and it would be passed on, and each family would make their apple cake. Really good German friendship apple cake. And it was just so lovely. And it was also really lovely because we knew that, you know, the family before us who passed it on to us, they just had their cake, and that, you know, maybe, I don't know, 6 months previously we had the similar cake. It just kept on going. It was going for a good like 5 years, I think, that tradition. I really liked it. It's a good tradition. If you can do that, if you've got children, or you know, if you've got friends who like baking, think about doing a German friendship cake, because that's a really nice one. I also do a tradition with my boys on a Sunday morning. We make banana pancakes. So they're sugar-free pancakes made with bananas instead of sugar, loads of berries. They each get a ramekin of berries. It can't be a bowl. They're just like, we do not want bowls, we wish for ramekins. Is very important. And they get the frozen berries, you know, freeze the berries in the freezer, and we put them into the pancakes and we cook them, and that's like our Sunday morning thing that we do. And I always think that's quite hyggelig. So those are some ideas. I'd really like to hear, you know, what your thoughts are on what would you make, or what would you choose for your most hyggelig, ceremonial, cozy eating experience. And the final thing I want to do, I've been looking at my Hygge emergency kit, which is something that I'll share later, but it's a really helpful little tool that Mike suggests, is to create your Hygge emergency kit, so that if you are in need of some solid Hygge love in any moment, you've got your emergency kit going. And I thought, well, what food items, you know, would I think about in terms of my Hygge emergency kit? So for me, it would be conscious chocolate, peppermint, essential oil, peppermint conscious chocolate, which I love. And the first time I had it, I was in Glastonbury, and I remember sitting I wasn't on the top of the tour, I was sort of halfway up the tour, and my friend was just like, here, have this piece of extraordinary deliciousness. And she gave it to me, and I was just like, oh! Always remember that memory. It's delicious anyway, but it's got a really strong visceral memory attached to it for me. And I have lime flower tea. And again, I really like lime flower tea, but it also reminds me of my herbalist lady I worked with from the Chamomile Clinic. She's amazing, by the way. Chamomile Clinic, look it up. Really awesome herbalist, and I worked with her for many years, and she introduced me to lime flower tea, where you would just buy the lime flowers. So I always have some lime flower tea when I really, really want it, and it's just delicious. And then there's the ceremony. So I'm going to share with you the things that I would include. So for my lime flower tea, this is my lime flower tea infuser, and you put the tea inside. pop the lid on, and then it sort of stirs itself around with its little green leaf. I don't know why, but I just love it. It's quite hypnotic. It moves round and round. And then I've got this special mug which I coveted for months, and then I got it and bought it, and it's round. It's a round mug. It's an Oliver Bonas mug. I wanted it for ages and ages, and I bought it for myself for Christmas. So nice. And the final thing I have is a teapot. And the teapot itself actually comes from the same friend who got me the conscious chocolate. She gave me the teapot. It's got a little handle, you see, and it's got this tea cozy on it. And this tea cozy is one that I made, and I made it over the course of a year. It was part of a ritual that I was doing. We did a series of rituals through the Sabbath with a group of very close witchy friends. And I got all this wool at the beginning of the time, and we had one ball of wool for each Sabbath. And everybody got some of the wool, and we blessed it each Sabbath. And so every Sabbath I would take my wool and I would do a row of my tea cozy. This is my Sabbath tea cozy, created over the course of a year with charged crocheted wool on it. I know it's got some tatty bits. I'm not the best crocheter in the world, but I really love it, and it really makes it feel special to me. And so for me, those are parts of my Hygge emergency kit. So I would love to hear from you any recipes that you've got that make you feel Hygge, that you're thinking, yes, I'd really like to do that in the coming winter months. And what would you put in your Hygge emergency kit for, food and drink for that moment in time when you need suddenly got to bring on the Hygge. So let me know.